Welcome back to Ripple Effect Connection. I'm your host, Kristi. I am a Level 3 integrative health practitioner and certified international health coach. My purpose is to connect you with the message and the messengers of life-changing and empowering information. Today's guest is at the cutting edge of circadian health, and his story might just change the way you think about light forever. The facts in this podcast are mind-blowing. Roudy Nassif is an engineer, a wellness entrepreneur, martial artist, and a light expert. He's educated thousands of health practitioners and doctors on the profound impact light has on our health and how to optimize it for better well-being. But his journey started in a very different place, with struggles of his own, from ADHD to depression and chronic fatigue. Everything shifted when he discovered the power of living in alignment with light and darkness. That revelation led him to co-create VivaRays and engineer the world's first circadian glasses designed to filter out the harmful effects of artificial light and restore healthy rhythms. In this conversation, we'll dive into how light affects everything from our mitochondria to our hormones to our blood sugar, and how simple shifts in light exposure can have a massive impact on your health. We'll also talk about sunglasses, friend or foe, and what do sunglasses have to do with sunburn, and why the blue light blocking glasses you have could be doing more harm than good. And have you ever thought about the weight gain you're experiencing having something to do with the lights in your living room? What Roudy will uncover today about our modern light environment might shock you and could fundamentally change everything you thought you knew about staying healthy. Get ready to learn how to optimize your light exposure and reclaim your natural rhythm. Here is my podcast with Roudy Nassif. Roudy, welcome to the podcast. I'm so honored that you took time out to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I start the podcast the same way with every guest. So our why is the foundation of everything we do. So I'm going to ask you, Roudy, what is your why and why did you create the company known as VivaRays?
Yeah, I love this question. It's perhaps the question that I find myself asking myself many times during the day. Like I do something and I'm like, I tap back into like, oh, why am I doing this? And it's fascinating to see that while it's very obvious that as a human beings, the why is one of the most important things because it brings us back to the desire of the heart. It fascinates me to see that oftentimes, even in business, most people are, launching things, doing things, and there's a lack of connection with the why. Personally, my why, I actually started VivaRays because honestly, I was going through intense hardship and setbacks. And during that time, picture me like a complete different person. Like you wouldn't even recognize me. And if I show a picture, which that would be nice, people will be shocked. So dark circles underneath my eyes, my skin so pale that I could have been, mistaken for a zombie. And my energy was extremely low. The kind of energy that when you step into it, it makes people want to move away. And honestly, during that time, I was doing everything. And I mean everything I heard that would elevate my life. Like I was taking the supplements, I was on best diets, doing the workouts. And I found myself constantly asking the question, why am I dying the slowest, most painful death imaginable day after day? And I couldn't find an answer. And I felt deeply miserable. And you know what? Like the one thing that I could recall very well is that every time I asked myself this question, every time I would be blaming myself for it, thinking that I'm somehow broken, that there is definitely something wrong with me. Now, one night, that was back in March 2017, I'm laying down in bed next to my former partner in our dark basement in Canada, and I'm scrolling on my phone. And honestly, I'm exhausted and I'm emotionally tired, and yet I'm wired. I can't stop. The blue light from the phone is shining on my face. My breath is very shallow. My heart is racing. And suddenly, as I'm scrolling, a video popped up on my feed. It says, artificial light is killing us. And I was like, whoa, what's that? I've never heard of this. So I click and I'm sitting there listening to Dr. Jack Kruse, and my brain fog was so thick that I could barely understand or process what he's saying. But here's the fascinating part. I wake up the second day and there's this one sentence that keeps echoing in my mind. You can't get healthy in the same light environment that made you sick. And I ask myself, wow, I've never heard of this before. Like, could this be the reason for everything I've been going through? The lack of energy, the constant fatigue, the depression? Now, the answer to this question did not only change my life, honestly, it brought me back to life. And here's what most people today have no idea about. And it's exactly what made me start VivaRays. It's the realization that the quality of our life is entirely dependent on the quality of the frequencies of light that enter our eyes every single day. And I realized that we all have a light problem. And it became very clear to me in a vision that in 100 years from now, people will literally look back at artificial lights the way we now look at smoking. And I could vividly see and feel that as the human species, we will truly feel ashamed and shocked that once upon a time, we spent our lives spending 12 to 16 hours under artificial lights that are the root cause of hormonal imbalances, causing sleep issues, depression, anxiety, and countless chronic issues. So that touched me so deeply. And instantly, and naturally, I felt like deep compassion and love for humanity and for myself. And I realized I don't want to wait for 100 years for humanity to realize that artificial light is literally hijacking our brains and destroying our biology. And I could only obsess over one idea, is to collapse this timeline from 100 years to 10 years and to help everybody that is ready to hear about the truth there is to light and the power that it holds on our biology. So that's why I started VivaRays.
Well, I think what we're going to probably bring light to, pun intended, there today is just that you're talking about, we have to make sure that the listeners understand. There is some light that is very good for you, very good for your eyes, and we're talking artificial light. So can you talk about what good light is and the quality of light does? And conversely, why is the artificial light so damaging?
Yeah, that's a great question. And light is truly a double-edged sword. It can either elevate our lives or make us sick, depressed, and overweight. And I wish somebody told me this when I was an 8-year-old kid struggling with ADHD. Now, that's a different story, but essentially what I did realize is that light is the language that nature speaks to us, shaping every aspect of our biology. Now, when I say this to people, they pause. And you know what? I'm not surprised they pause. Because for most of our lives, we've been thinking that light is something superficial that we turn on and off to allow us to see the world around us. So essentially, this is where it stopped. Light is something that allows us to see. However, light is much deeper than this. It's literally information, and the most powerful information that impact our endocrine system, our nervous system, and our circadian system. And just like the information that we daily allow into our minds can either trap us in fear, think about the news and all the bad stuff that you're exposed to when you're watching television, or there are some form of information that could empower us. Think about a book that you've read that changed your life. Light similarly is a double-edged sword. It really depends on what type of light you're exposed yourself to and what time of the day this exposure is happening. And the result is that you either really elevate your life or you make yourself sick. Now, I want to bring this back to Albert Einstein. And oftentimes when I say Albert Einstein, most people think, yeah, how is that related to biology? I mean, Albert Einstein was a great physicist. And here's what's absolutely shocking. Every discovery that Albert Einstein made at the level of physics translate back into our biology. And in fact, the physics of nature is essentially mirroring what happens inside of our cells. And here's how. Albert Einstein photoelectric effects, he showed us that when light shines on metal, it essentially generates electrons, and that electrons flow generate electricity. Now, most people would think, well, we're not metal, right? We're not a piece of metal. But think about your hemoglobin. We have a lot of mineral-based metal in our bodies that essentially respond to photons and waves of light. And this is how literally plants photosynthesize and solar panels work. But here's the fascinating part. It's how the body also works. Now, there's a Nobel Prize winner. His name is Albert Szent-Györgyi. He discovered that sunlight excites electrons in the electron transport chain of the mitochondria, which is essentially that tiny little engine in our body that process the food that we eat to generate energy. But it turns out it's not only about the food. It's also about the light information that the mitochondria is receiving, because this light is essentially what creates the electricity that the mitochondria need to metabolize the food properly and turn it into energy. And now it's literally scientifically known that 1/3 of the energy that we get comes from the food, and 2/3 literally comes from sunlight. Now, this shouldn't be a surprise, because take a step back and pause. What is it? What source of energy is essentially giving energy to the plants? It's sunlight. And without sunlight, nothing that lives on this planet could actually live. So why would it be a surprise to realize that sunlight is essentially the mother of all the energy that let that flow of electricity happen inside of our body? Now, later, another researcher, two researchers actually, back in 1979, Martinek and Berezin, they took this a step further by showing, they showed that, when you're speaking about sunlight, you're speaking about a full spectrum of different frequencies. And I'd like you to imagine the rainbow. And the rainbow, you're seeing all of the colors ranging from blue light all the way to red light. All of these colors exist in sunlight and beyond. We have invisible frequencies like UVA, UVB, and infrared light, all of which have metabolic effects on our biology. And what these two researchers show, that essentially specific frequencies of sunlight can make different enzymes speed up digestion, energy production, and cellular repair up to 500% more. So it essentially activates those different enzymes. It turns out that a lot of the enzymes in our bodies are photosensitive, and they are hungry for those photons from sunlight. So, taking a step back on this, and I want to re-emphasize the number. I mean, imagine becoming 500% better, absorbing nutrients from every meal. I mean, how would that impact your energy, your recovery? And think about how much less food you'd need to actually feel satisfied. Way back when my light environment was extremely destructive, I used to eat 6 to 7 times per day, and I spent thousands of dollars on supplements, and I never felt well, and I never felt satisfied. And after I changed my light environment, today, literally, I eat 1 to 2 times per day. Currently, I take no supplements, and I'm feeling younger, better, and more agile than ever before. Now, how could that be possible?
Yeah, I think what happens too is sometimes, because these aren't things people can see and touch, like they don't understand what's happening. And so they think these things that are woo, which are actually, like you're saying, physics. This is actually why we're here and how we're here. And then conversely, can you give them the other side of this? Whereas the light they do understand, the one where they can flip the switch, like you're saying, is not that kind of light. And you're getting that kind of light at the wrong times of the day also.
Yes, absolutely. Because in the same way the sunlight energizes us, what's the polar opposite of sunlight? It's darkness. It's essentially darkness. And every system in nature follow this one process that either lead to flourishment or self-destruction. And this one simple process is the balance of polarities. So in every system of nature, you'll observe that the system is composed of opposing forces that are interchanging. And the quality and the sustainability of that process is dependent on whether that interchange is balanced or not. Think of inhalation and exhalation. Those are two opposing forces that must happen in balance, because imagine yourself to be inhaling all the time and never exhaling. You'll end up exploding. Your lungs will explode and you'll die, right? Now, bring this to human relations. Every romantic relationship is a unity between a man and a woman. And the success of this unity is dependent on the balance between those two polar opposites. Now, in the same way, we have the opposing forces between sunlight and darkness. And just like sunlight energizes us during the day, darkness is what gives the signal to our brain that the day is ending, so that the body starts secreting all of the hormones that allow us to access a deep, restful night's sleep. Now, you're probably familiar with the hormone melatonin, which is known as the sleep hormone. And when we are day after day missing that signal of darkness in our eyes, we don't only mess up with our sleep. Melatonin is also the highest antioxidant in nature. Now think about this. Most people go for really powerful antioxidants from food like blueberries and dark chocolates. Melatonin is 5 to 10 times more potent than the most powerful antioxidant we get from food. And also, it's a very powerful messenger that activates the cellular cleaning crew that is known as autophagy, apoptosis, and mitophagy. And those are fancy terms that describe cellular processes that allow us to essentially get rid of old cells and replace them with new cells so that we can continue to renew and rejuvenate ourselves. Now, here's what's absolutely fascinating. In order for you to understand the significance of autophagy and apoptosis, I'd like you to think of, a process of living in a house. If you're in a house and you stop taking the trash out, at first you wouldn't notice, but then day after day, the trash will start piling up. And then your home will become extremely toxic and unlivable. And this is exactly what happens inside of our cells when we destroy that cellular mechanism that allows the cell to clean itself. Most people talk about detox and about different protocols for detoxing. But the most fundamental way we're designed to detox every single night is by allowing our bodies to soak in that darkness so that melatonin increases and it sends a signal for our liver, for our guts, for our brain, for our heart to start repairing those old cells and replacing them with new cells. And this is literally how we're designed to rejuvenate ourselves. Now, back in 1973, there is a scientist, his name is Dr. John Ott. He literally walked into first grade classrooms in Florida and he replaced the toxic fluorescent lightings with full spectrum sunlight lamps. And then those kids essentially were really struggling with focus, and a lot of them were labeled as ADHD. Now, here's what's really mind-blowing. Within 1 week, just 7 days, those hyperactive kids that could not sit still and that could not focus, they were now calm, focused, and even their cognition increased because it reflected in their ability to perform in their exams. So think about this for a moment. These precious kids did not need drugs. All they needed was essentially one person to get really curious about them instead of judging them, and to see them as God-sent messenger to teach us about our own imbalances so that we can create environments that allow us to thrive. And there's a lot of fascinating things that Dr. John Ott did, but essentially there's another experiment where he saw that the children under sunlight were developing only 1/3 of the dental cavities compared to kids who were sitting under fluorescent lightings all day long. Now, think about this for a moment. I mean, how many of us struggle with dental problems? And we've been taught to think that, it's about flossing or brushing techniques or, the toothbrush or the toothpaste. But what if it's also about the very light that we're sitting under? Because when Dr. Odd gave those kids the right light, their teeth naturally became more resilient to decay. And I would bet and I would imagine that if Dr. John Ott also went a step further and helped those kids to block artificial light that night, that this percentage would have dropped all the way down to zero. In fact, 10 or 11 years ago, growing up as a kid, I had a lot of dental issues all of the time. And I spent a lot of time going to the dentist and fixing those dental issues and coming back way back when I was a little kid. Today, I'm 33 years old. And for the past 5 years, I've never dealt with one dental issue. How is that possible?
I was going to go back to what you were saying about the melatonin. If you're using the artificial light, you're actually probably creating the opposite, where your cortisol is probably going up at night, which is not supposed to happen either, right? You're getting the reverse effect if you're using that artificial light.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a great point, because essentially imagine this. And most people, when I ask them to imagine this, they have a hard time imagining it because the last time they were in an environment that I was describing was probably years ago. And ask people, imagine yourself to be around a beautiful bonfire in nature under a canopy of twinkling stars. And you're watching this fire, flickering in front of your eyes. It's warm, flickering light. This is the light that our biology is expecting after the sunset. Now, go with me to the living room of most humans today. LED lights in the ceiling, the TV is glowing, the phone is in the hand. See, this is not 10 lux of natural brightness. It's absolutely shocking. This light is 50 to 100 times brighter than a fire. Now, it's 500 to 1,000 times brighter than a full moon. So we're literally living upside down from what nature intended. And here's what this does to our body that most health experts today have no idea about. We spoke as we mentioned that light is information and is the most powerful information that tells the brain about the time of the day so that the body and the brain could orchestrate the timing of when we secrete different hormones. And here's the thing about hormones, that when we secrete the right hormone at the right time, magic. We're happy, we're thriving. But when we start secreting the wrong hormone at the wrong time, this is where we start running into big issues. And you mentioned cortisol. Now, cortisol is very helpful first thing in the morning. When we wake up first thing in the morning, we go outside and we allow the sunlight to enter our eyes. What happens instantly is that the brain sends a signal to the adrenal gland to produce cortisol and adrenaline. So this healthy pulse of cortisol literally wake us up and make us feel alert, energized, and ready to tackle the day. Now, the same hormone secreted at night will absolutely flip the equation. Why? Because we're not supposed to have cortisol after the sunset in our bodies. And when we are sitting in a room exposed to all these artificial lights after the sunset, the body starts secreting cortisol. And as a result, we start feeling wired, anxious, and stimulated. We get deceived into thinking that we're night owls and that we function best at night because our creativity increases. But what we don't realize is that light is a drug and it's causing you to have a hormone at the wrong time of the day. It's increasing your dopamine and your cortisol when you're actually supposed to have melatonin, the polar opposite in your system. So nobody today has a night owl problem. Most of us have a light problem. And when cortisol increases in the body, it's essentially very problematic because cortisol sends sugar to the muscle evolutionarily so that we can run away from predators. So like imagine you're in nature and you see a tiger. In that moment, the body increases your cortisol so that you can drive all of the glucose for your muscles and run away from that predator. Now, Dr. Fritz Hollwich, he's a German scientist. Back in the 1970s, he said that with all these artificial lights on, the body is constantly running away from a predator without having a tiger in the room. And here's how Fritz Hollwich was able to prove this. He took a group of people who had cataracts in their eyes, meaning that no light could penetrate the retina to enter their brain. And what he saw is that their hormones were an absolute mess, and cortisol and adrenaline were abnormally low. Now, after their cataracts were surgically removed, their hormones normalized back as just like a flower springing after the winter. And that's when Fritz Hollwich asked himself a very interesting question. He said, okay, what will happen if I bring a group of healthy individuals who eat super healthy diet, who exercise, and I put them under these fluorescent lightings for 12 to 16 hours every single night? And what he saw is absolutely shocking. Their body was literally responding to that light as though there was a predator that is chasing them. There was a crazy cortisol response that was happening in response to that. And if you think about this for a moment, for millions of years, the body responded in such a way in the face of death. But today, your living room every night is causing the same alarming biological response. And no wonder why everybody today is talking about a nervous system problem. But the question is, do we really have a nervous system problem, or do we have an environment problem that is triggering our nervous system in the wrong way and constantly hijacking our cortisol system?
Yeah. And that's a form of stress, and that's what we try to talk about the clinic where I work. I work for Dr. Will Cole, and we have autoimmune patients. And sometimes I'll see people, and we'll ask them about this if they live in a place, let's say, where it's colder, and they're not getting as much light because it's not as sunny, or they're not going outside, or they're, God forbid, working in an office that doesn't have a window, and they're having them buy the lights like you're talking about to generate that sunlight so that they are getting that light, and it can make a profound difference. They're so sensitive and sick, they can't tolerate anything. And then they kind of like look at you like you have 10 heads because you're saying, hey, do you watch the sun set and get some sunlight in the morning? And they think like, what does this have to do with anything? Like, well, it can make a profound difference in your health. So I want to back up what you're saying from a clinical standpoint. That's what I see. And that's why I'm doing this podcast with you, is because I know how important it is. And one thing that I think I do want to dispel out there, I remember this conversation with you at the Reimagine Health Summit last year. I said to you something about my blue light glasses, and you told me it's not about blocking blue light, and you showed me the meter and you talked to me about that. So can you talk about this? Because that's what a lot of people are going to say, well, I have blue light blockers. Can you talk to me about, especially if you're wearing blue light blockers all day, can you talk to me why regular blue light glasses are actually not necessarily the answer in this aspect? And then we'll get into more about the glasses that you do make.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the most profound transformation that I went through is living with indigenous people up north in Canada and farming with them for weeks at a time. And during that time, I started noticing how every aspect of my biology was getting optimized. So I was watching my sleep, my energy, my mood. I was documenting everything. And I committed to take that time for essentially studying and devouring every study I could find on the science of light to solve the light problem. And I was traveling a lot between the farm and the city. So I was looking for a tool that could protect me from artificial lights when I'm in the city. So I could finally, live a normal life, go out with friends, move around without dealing with all the negative consequences. Here's where it gets really interesting. I started researching blue light blocking glasses back then, and I got really excited and bought 3 pairs of the clear blue light blocking glasses. It was one for me, one for my sister, and one for my former partner. And it's so funny because you'll see us, the 3 together all the time, and we're all like wearing the clear blue blockers, naively thinking to ourselves that we just cracked the code for solving the light problem. But then after a week or so, nothing, no magic, no change. And I noticed that I was actually not getting any of the benefits that I thought I would get. And I was very puzzled because my research clearly showed that if I was to block blue and green light after the sunset, I would actually protect my circadian rhythm, and that I shouldn't be feeling all the negative consequences, like waking up feeling tired and less motivated and more foggy. So my optometrist had reassured me that this is exactly what the clear lenses were doing. And at that point, I clearly saw that through my own experience, they're not working. I did not have a mirror back then to back up my thinking. So I kept trying all these different brands, yellow lenses, orange lenses, red lenses. And to my disappointment, none of them really worked. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm really going to figure this out. As an engineer, I have a very curious mind. And when I'm faced with an issue, the one thing is I start obsessing over it. I dream about it. I want to understand why. So I got really obsessed, and I got this spectrocolorimeter. It's essentially a tool that will allow you to measure the light that is present in a given environment. So I could finally measure the light of the LEDs. I could also measure what the glasses were doing. And essentially what I saw is that most of the glasses that I had purchased did not do what they advertised to do. And I'll break it down for you here, because I started first by testing the clear lenses. And what I realized, yes, clear lenses block blue light. But which blue light do they block? They block blue-purple light, which is the frequency that is ranging from 400 to 420 nanometer. And I don't want to get very technical here, but when we're speaking about blue light is a wave. And this wave ranges between 400 nanometer in frequency to 500 nanometers. So that's full spectrum blue light. Now, I took this spectrocolorimeter and I measured the light that is coming from the LEDs. And what I realized is that those LEDs do not emit any blue-purple light. They start their emission at 430 nanometer and they peak at 455 nanometer. So I literally got scammed by that pen demonstration showing that the blue light is getting blocked. And then I got really intrigued. I bought that pen and I measured, and it turns out that this pen emits blue-purple light. And this is how they deceive you by showing you that those clear lenses actually block the blue light, when in reality, they're not blocking the right frequency. And to help you visualize this, it's as if you're trying to rinse your quinoa in a pasta strainer. The quinoa will pass through the holes because you are using the wrong filter. Yeah. So next, what I did is I tested those dark yellow tinted glasses, which you'll see a lot of influencers today wearing these dark yellow tinted glasses during the day. And what I start noticing, I'm a very sensitive person energetically. So if you feed me something or you add something to my routine, it's so easy for me to tap inward and to experience the consequence of that thing that I added into my routine, and to realize whether it was good for me or bad for me. And what I noticed is that when I was wearing those dark yellow tinted glasses during the day, I would get suddenly very sleepy and tired at a time when my brain is supposed to be, working at its optimum, 10 a.m. in the morning. I measured those lenses, and what I realized is that they were essentially blocking 100% of the blue light at 455 nanometer. And the issue with this is that in the process of doing this, they block all the blue turquoise light at 480 nanometer, which if you look in the literature, in the circadian literature, it's the exact frequency that the IPRGCs, which are the intrinsic photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. So think of them as cells in our eyes that are sensitive to light. And these cells essentially are looking for this frequency during the day to tell the brain that it's daytime. And when we block this frequency during the day, the brain essentially thinks it's afternoon, and it suppresses our energy level and our metabolic system. And that explains why I was getting so tired. So the journey continued on, and then I started testing orange tinted glasses, red tinted glasses. And I was really shocked to see that even though the lenses were orange and red, they still allowed massive peaks of blue light. In fact, not too long time ago, I received an email from a doctor. Her name is Noah, and she had suggested another company. I don't want to mention their name, and because they're much cheaper than VivaRays, and she wanted to get the glasses for a group of people. She made that purchase, and she had like 25 people over there. And Noah had her own meter. What she did there is like she was showing them the glasses and making the demonstration of these red lenses, and then she was absolutely shocked because she saw that the glasses were still entering a massive spike of blue lights. She reached out to us and she shared the story, and she asked me if I'd be willing to offer like a big discount for her group, and I ended up helping her. The moral from all of this is that there's a lot of lenses on the market, and a lot of them do not do what they advertise to do. And it's at that point when I realized this, I met with an optical engineer from Florida who heard about like my story and my realization, and he actually agreed to help me. And it was a long process, to be honest, where I'm like talking to him, sending him instructions. He's designing some of the melanin pigmentation dyes and sending them back to me. And I would picture me in my garage, wearing gloves, face mask, hunched over and manually tinting lenses from morning to night. And after 9 months of failing over and over again, finally we were able to get the first pair that blocked the right amount of artificial light at the right time of the day. So we have the daytime lenses that you and I are wearing right now. And those are not blue blockers. They essentially harmonize blue light. Because again, visualize that when you're sitting in front of a screen, you're being bombarded by this narrow spike of blue at 455 nanometer. And it turns out that this frequency is inflammatory. It causes a lot of inflammation, and it increases the reactive oxygen species in the mitochondria, and it ends up causing a lot of mitochondrial damage. So while blue light is good during the day, specifically receiving the frequencies in isolation is not good, because when we are exposed to blue light from the sun, it's never blue light in isolation. It always symbiotically comes with other frequencies of colors like yellow, orange, red, and infrared that are regenerative in nature, and they balance out the degenerative effect of blue light. So it ties back to that same idea of the polar opposites interchanging in balance. And that light that we're exposed to lacks that balance. And what the daytime lenses do, they harmonize that frequency by decreasing its sharpness. And then on the mirror, what you'll notice is that you're getting more of the yellow, orange, and red light to balance out that spike of blue light. And naturally, what happens is people who are struggling with headaches, agitation, essentially, like, I don't know, there's a term that people use when their eyes are like getting kind of like sensitive, and the light will essentially disappear because you're eliminating that frequency that's causing that inflammation. And then after the sunset, at that time, hopefully you're getting out and seeing the sunset. And there's essentially really interesting research showing that getting exposed to sunset light literally make you more resilient to your exposure to artificial light afterwards. So in these studies, they looked at a group of women from Netherlands, I think 12 women from Netherlands, who were exposed to artificial light after the sunset. And they measured their melatonin suppression, which ranged between 35 and 75%. And what they noticed is that if they expose those women to sunset before their artificial light exposure, melatonin suppression decreased. I'm not exactly sure by how much it decreases. Of course, it doesn't eliminate the suppression. You'll still experience negative consequences, and yet you become more resilient. So it's absolutely important to go outside during that time, and you don't need to be gazing the sun or seeing the sun setting off the horizon. Just by being outside and allowing yourself to receive that slowly fading light, which is information flowing into your system, it essentially gives you the benefits and makes you more resilient to artificial light afterwards. And then when you come back home, you want to protect yourself from the wrong light information. And that's where you will use the evening lenses, which clip onto the base frame seamlessly. These are designed to mimic the exact color temperature of the bonfire at 1800 kelvins. It essentially blocks all of the blue and part of the green. And the idea from it is evolutionary. It's the bonfire that we gathered around for thousands and thousands of years. And this light essentially is very friendly, and it allows our nervous system to wind down, and it doesn't disrupt our circadian biology. So this is the idea from the evening lenses. You're supposed to wear those after the sunset. You're still able to run your evening activities, do your tasks on your computer, have dinner with your family, and yet you're protecting your system from receiving the wrong frequencies of light. And then finally, when you're truly ready to go to bed, 1 hour before bedtime, you clip on the nighttime lenses. And those, you could picture those as the end of the bonfire when the wood turns into amber coil. And naturally, by that time, you feel cozy, ready for bed. These lenses essentially filter out all of the blue, all of the green, and they decrease the brightness by 10 times, which naturally tells your brain it's dark outside, optimizes melatonin production, and help you get a restful night's sleep.
Yeah, they're awesome. I can attest to it. I mean, since I got the glasses last year, I don't ever or rarely have an issue falling asleep. I used to kind of it took me a while to fall asleep. And when I was a kid, my mom called me a night owl, and that was like funny. And, it was like a joke back then. But now it's like, oh my God, that was detrimental. Like, what was I doing? Like, that wasn't good, staying up late. So what happens if, let's just say, because I do see a lot of clients and patients that they work wonky hours, and so they're actually sleeping, they're spending their life in a reverse upside down, circadian rhythm. Like, what can people like that do, if anything? Because I have advised people, like, look, I don't want to tell anyone to quit their job, but if you're not feeling well and you're continuing to suffer in this kind of lifestyle, you might want to look and see if you can get switched to a day shift, etc. So is there anything that people who experience working in a different environment like that upside down, is there anything they can do to help?
Yes, ideally switching their shifts to daytime shifts, because we are diurnal beings. And anytime we try to operate outside of this, we're trying to swim against thousands of years of biological evolution, which makes it harder and a lot more straining. Of course, there are some tools that people could do. Ideally, if they are working on a nighttime shift, ideally they stay on that shift and they don't swing back between daytime shift and nighttime shift. So it turns out that swinging back between daytime and nighttime shift is a lot more destructive than staying in your nighttime shifts, because Your circadian rhythm is constantly trying to adjust and to shift, advance shift or delay shift for many hours within 1 week, which is very stressful on the system. So the first thing is ideally you stay within the main shift. If it's a nighttime shift, you stay on that shift. And within that, you essentially want to flip your day upside down, meaning that the sunset becomes your sunrise, essentially. So you'd never want to skip that sunset. And then when you go to work and you're exposed to a lot of that artificial light, for the first few hours of your shift, I would be wearing the VivaRays daytime lenses to harmonize the inflammatory frequency coming from your devices. And then essentially, if you're working on an 8-hour shift, I would say for the first 6 hours of the shift, stay with the daytime lenses. And with the last 2 to 3 hours, you want to shift to the evening lenses. Because now as your shift is ending, that's the end of your day. Even though we are, the morning may be approaching, this is not your morning. This is your nighttime. And during those 3 hours, you would want to wear the evening lenses. And essentially, the moment your shift ends, it's absolutely important to block as much of the light as possible. You don't want that sunrise to tell your brain the day is starting, because it will absolutely flip your biology upside down. So what I would do is, the moment your shift ends and you leave your work, I would wear the VivaRays nighttime lenses until you arrive at home. When you arrive at home, it's extremely important that you create an environment that looks like a cave. You want to block all form of artificial light. Even tiny little amounts of artificial light will be enough to disrupt your biology, because you're already not in a really good place. So you want to make your absolute best to create that best dark environment when you are sleeping. And you want to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, and then wake up and go outside right away, because even though it may be 12 or 1 in the afternoon for you, this is your morning sunlight. This is your sunrise, essentially, that is helping you to get the cortisol spike first thing in the morning and helping you to feel more energized and focused.
Yeah, and I think I think of nurses too all the time. Like they have to work, the overnights, and they see people with just high blood pressure just from working overnights, like literally just having high blood pressure issues from that. I think the other question I would have for you is sunglasses. Should people wear sunglasses?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think sunglasses are one of the greatest endocrine disruptors. It's an innovation that we introduced about 100 years ago, or even less, that have caused us a tremendous amount of negative impacts on our nervous system. Now, why is that? If you think about a plant, every plant photosynthesizes. And what that means is that the plant is harnessing that light energy and converting it into glucose so that it can thrive. Even when you observe plants literally direct their leaves in the direction of sunlight throughout the day, and they drop their leaves down at night when the sun is out so that they can conserve energy and essentially stop the photosynthesis process. So most people think, well, I'm not a plant. But when you start thinking about the photoelectric effect, that light shining on our molecules excite electrons and generate electricity. You look at plants and you look at human beings and you realize that there's a lot of similarities. In plants, they have chlorophylls. They have a very similar structures to hemoglobins. Like they're absolutely similar. And the only difference is that at the center of chlorophyll is a magnesium atom, whereas at the center of hemoglobin is an iron atom. Now, what's the difference between magnesium and iron? Iron has a lot more electrons than magnesium, meaning having more electrons in our system, we are designed to interact with sunlight at an even deeper level than plants. Again, the photoelectric effect is telling us that light is shining on electrons, generating electricity. So think about it, that when you are putting those sunglasses, you're completely blocking your system from all the frequencies of light that essentially allow your body to activate that electricity and creating the energy that the cells need to actually do work. And it gets even worse because the sunglasses essentially block 100% of UVA and UVB light. And most people are really scared from those frequencies because they have been told that UV causes cancer and cataracts in the eye. What most people don't realize is that we have opsins in our eyes called neuropsins. And those are opsins that are designed to absorb UVA and UVB. So the question is, why will nature develop a mechanisms in our eyes and in our skin for us to actually absorb UV light if UV light was bad for us? And what it turns out is that when neuropsin absorb UV light, it activates a molecule in our body called POMC, propiomelaanocortin, which is composed of 242 amino acids that can become so many different peptides and hormones. So UV light activates POMC. POMC essentially becomes beta endorphins, which is our body's natural painkiller and feel-good hormone. How many people you know struggle from muscle and joint pain? What if I told you that by only removing your sunglasses outside and allowing that UV to enter your body, that you could actually flood your body with beta endorphin and naturally decrease that pain and allow yourself to feel better? Also, POMC becomes alpha MSH, beta MSH, and gamma MSH. MSH is melanocyte stimulating hormone. So essentially, when UV light enter our eyes, the brain start producing alpha melanocyte stimulating hormones, which send a signal to our skin to produce melanin. Now, melanin is known as the compound that protect us from burning. It's what allow us to tan. And when we are sitting outside in the sun with sunglasses, we're blocking this connection between the eye, the brain, and the skin. And therefore, the skin will not produce melanin properly, and we're more likely to burn.
Oh, that's interesting. I did not know that. That's interesting.
Yes. Also, alpha MSH is a very high anti-inflammatory, and there's a direct correlation between obesity and weight gain and alpha MSH disruption. It turns out that alpha MSH suppresses our desire to eat. And this explains why, if you've ever been down in Mexico on a vacation, spending your day around like at the beach, you'll notice that the day has passed and you don't feel hungry. And how is that possible? This is tied to alpha MSH production in the brain. And when this system of alpha MSH is disrupted, we are more likely to start relying on food as a source of energy. Also, it turns out melanin it has the quality of a semiconductor and essentially allows us to generate electrons as light strikes it. So it's an electron generator, which leads to the electricity that the body needs in order to produce energy. And it turns out that melanin is one of the highest anti-inflammatories, but it's also anti-parasitic and anti-mold. And when you realize that melanin, which is designed to be essentially produced in the presence of UV light, and UV has to enter our eyes and it has to strike our skin in order to produce that melanin, and that nature has given us that mechanism to protect ourselves from mold, from parasites, from infections, then why would we ever wear sunglasses?
That's so enlightening. That was great. Thank you for giving that, because there was definitely some info in there I did not know about. So that's even more of an impact than I thought there would be. So let's see if we have this right for them. If they get up in the morning and they get sunlight early, let's say they're using your glasses throughout the day to help with I tell people to take sun breaks, to, go outside in the afternoon and lunchtime. I walk my dogs, I get a nice long break, and I'm out in the sunlight, and then try to watch the sun set at night, and then, use your glasses at night to modulate any of this artificial light. Would you say that's a good routine for them to get in? Or is there anything you would add to that?
I would start with that. That's an absolutely amazing routine. And starting only with that will have an absolutely enormous impact on every aspect of your health. Like if you were struggling with acne, that will translate and your cells will be able to reverse that. If you were somebody who was struggling with insomnia, which, for example, my mom had been struggling with insomnia for over 8 years back when I was at the farm. And during that time, she was really struggling because she could barely get 2 to 3 hours of sleep. And that glorious, wonderful, glowing mom that I've always known was disappearing in front of my eyes. And one thing about my mom is that she has been always driven by the desire to give love to others. And naturally, after 8 years of not being able to get good restful night's sleep, her ability to give start diminishing. Now, when I reach out to her and I start sharing with her about some of the discoveries I was tapping into on the farm, she said to me, I would do anything because essentially her doctor came to a place where he recommended that she starts drinking alcohol before bed. And alcohol is a sedative. And she said, like, there's nothing we can do. Like, try alcohol. And that drove me crazy. So all I shared with my mom is exactly the steps that you just shared. I sent her a pair of glasses that I had made in my garage, and I asked her to go outside every single morning, watch the sunrise, and to spend as much time as possible throughout the day periodically outside, and to watch the sunset, and to make sure that she's blocking artificial light after the sunset. And within a matter of weeks, my mother gained back 8 hours of sleep. And fast forward today, she's a completely different human being.
Wow. That's awesome. That's so awesome. I think one last question before I get into how people can connect with you. I've got a 30-day blood sugar reset coming up. And one of the things I'm doing in this group course that I'm doing is I'm talking about all of the things that can affect your blood sugar besides just food. So is there a relationship here? I know you mentioned hormones and insulin is a hormone. So is there a relationship here between light and blood sugar that maybe you could share as some insight for the folks that might be taking that course?
Yeah, absolutely. So the moment light enters our eyes at night and it spikes our cortisol, that instantly spikes our blood glucose level without eating a single bite. Because again, like cortisol is driving that glucose into our muscles. I think anybody who's struggling with blood sugar issues, they know that when your blood sugar is unstable, it negatively impacts everything, your mood, your thinking, your craving. And what's really sad to me is oftentimes people are trying to control their blood glucose issues by only controlling their food intake. And what they don't realize is it doesn't matter what you're eating. If you are sitting in the wrong light environment, your blood glucose will be spiking and crashing without you eating a single bite. So it does not matter how much you put willpower to control your food intake. You need to start thinking about fixing your light environment. And this also, when this happens, when cortisol goes up and your blood glucose spikes, it also causes insulin to spike because insulin is trying to lower your blood glucose back to normal. And if anybody is unfamiliar with this term, insulin is essentially, it acts like a key unlocking the door of our cells so that we can take in that sugar from the blood and use it for energy or store it for later use. Now, here's what's very shocking is what most people don't know is that cortisol suppresses the effects of insulin because it wants to direct the glucose to the muscles instead of the cell because we want to fight and flight. And over time, this causes insulin resistance and even type 2 diabetes. You know, anybody who's struggling with blood glucose issues, they could attest to themselves that like the moment your blood glucose spikes, it causes you to have sugar and carb cravings. And that essentially bring you back to that loop of trying to use your willpower to control your food intake when in reality you're sitting in a box that is flooding your body with the wrong hormones at the wrong time and causing you to be in a situation where you're trying to swim upstream.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that and for sharing everything that you've shared today and for spending so much time with us. I am so fortunate to be able to tap into your wisdom. You want to let people know now how they can get the glasses, and we'll link all this up, of course, in the show notes, but let them know how they can reach out to you and follow what you do and follow VivaRays. I'd be happy for you to pass that along.
Yes, absolutely. So our website is www.vivarays.com, VivaRays.com. This is where you could see all of our glasses. We have other products like the blackout sleeping mask made from organic cotton. By the way, all of our glasses also are made from 100% biodegradable materials, either from FSC certified wood or plant bio-based material. And also on the website, you'll have access to an abundance of blogs that I personally write to talk about the impact of light on different aspects of our endocrine system. So if you're struggling with insomnia or with chronic fatigue or with acne, you'll probably find a blog that talks about light and that particular topic. If there's anything that you want to hear about that perhaps we haven't written on, please feel free to reach out to us at support@vivarays.com and let us know what is it that you want to learn about. If you have any questions about the product, any questions outside of the product regarding the Lighth protocol, how you could effectively implement those steps into your life, please reach out and we'll absolutely be honored to help you and support you with anything. So also, lastly, we share a lot of our educational material on our email newsletter every Thursday. So if you want to continue to hear from us and to be educated more and more about how light is impacting us as human beings and how we together we can solve the light problem, make sure that you sign up to our free e-booklet on the website where you'll learn about light and simple, easy steps that you can implement so that you can recover your sleep, your energy, and mood. And automatically you would be subscribed to our email newsletter where you could receive all the blogs, all the education.
Yeah, it's awesome. I can vouch for Roudy's education is awesome. I remember I still have the PDFs that you guys shared, the ebook that you shared last time. I use it as a reference point all the time. I know you're going to be in front of the light and I'm going to go out and take a light break. Now I've got some nice natural light coming in the windows while I'm doing this, but I'm also going to go out and get some more sunlight after this. So come back anytime, Roudy, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap for today. If you enjoy the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on social media. I'm at Whole Health Kristi on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. Let me know what resonated or even what you might want to hear in the future. You can always find full show notes and past episodes at kristihugic.com/podcast. Please take a moment to like, follow, review, and share the podcast with anyone who might benefit. And a quick review on Apple Podcasts goes a long way in helping me bring more of these amazing guests your way. Stay tuned for the next episode of Ripple Effect Connection. Together, let's create waves of change.